Have you ever wondered why you are disliked for no apparent reason? Why does the feeling of rejection haunt you, despite your awareness of your own worth and potential? Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists in history, offered a fascinating explanation for this phenomenon, revealing unexpected facets of human psychology. According to Jung, the root of dislike often lies not in your actions or words, but in something much deeper, your inner strength. Paradoxically, you are rejected not because of weakness, but because your authenticity and presence can cause discomfort in others. Your true essence turns out to be too powerful to fit into the narrow confines of limited perception. This profound psychological truth, often remaining behind the scenes, is crucial for understanding why some people distance themselves from you. Jung taught that every person carries an inner duality, light and shadow. However, many spend their lives concealing their dark sides instead of facing them. When you manifest as a person true to yourself, not wearing masks and not dimming your true light, something important happens. You become a mirror. And this is the essence of Jungian psychology. People project their own insecurities and unresolved conflicts onto you. Your very existence reminds them of the parts of themselves that they suppress and deny. This causes discomfort, envy, and a feeling of their own inadequacy. Instead of facing these painful emotions, many find it easier to reject you. It is more convenient to break the mirror than to look at your own reflection, revealing their flaws. This is one of the deepest and most uncomfortable truths of depth psychology, making one think about the nature of human relationships and self-perception. However, there is an important aspect that is often overlooked. Rejection by others does not indicate arrogance or conceit. On the contrary, it arises as a consequence of rejecting a life dictated by social norms and striving to reveal one's true essence. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the path to achieving psychological integrity. Authenticity in a world where conformity is preferred comes at a price. A person who goes their own way inevitably faces rejection, criticism, and sometimes loneliness. A free individual questions the foundations of a society based on adaptation and fear. The irony is that rejection often serves as confirmation of the correctness of the chosen path. Jung emphasized that the pain of rejection is often the first sign of awakening inner strength. This is a kind of rite of initiation, a moment of liberation from external expectations and the acquisition of an authentic self. This is where the huge potential lies. The pain of rejection can become a gateway to personal growth and inner strength. However, to realize this, it is necessary to shed light on a key psychological mechanism: projection. This is where the secret of getting rid of the embarrassment caused by other people's opinions lies. Before we delve into this topic, I suggest sharing your thoughts. Have you ever felt that your very existence causes dislike in some people? Have you noticed that as you gain authenticity, rejection intensifies? Share your experiences in the comments. Your words can help others understand that they are not alone. If you are convinced that depth psychology can change lives, support this opinion with a like and a subscription. Every shared thought and every person who resonates with this message contributes to the growth of awareness. Let's dive into the world of psychology together and continue exploring projection, because this knowledge can be the key to self-confidence. Rejection from others is not always a consequence of their contempt for you, but rather a reflection of their misunderstanding or unwillingness to accept what you awaken in them. Awareness of this fact can radically change your perception of dislike. In this regard, Carl Jung's ideas are particularly relevant because he was one of the few psychologists who boldly spoke about the deep causes of social isolation and alienation. Many people mistakenly believe that rejection is a sign of their personal inadequacy, proof of their insufficiency in every sense. However, Jung held a different point of view. He argued that rejection is often a consequence not of weakness, but of inner strength that does not depend on external factors, such as material well-being, social status, or attractive appearance. This strength grows from your authenticity, the ability to remain true to yourself without needing anyone's approval. Such a manifestation of individuality is rare, and therefore may be perceived by others as a threat to their own established ideas about the world. Carl Jung dedicated a significant portion of his work to studying the unseen forces of the psyche, the unconscious mechanisms that influence our lives in society. One such mechanism is psychological projection. When you appear in society with genuine and unfeigned energy, you become a kind of mirror for those who have not yet rid themselves of self-deception. And here lies the key point. The dislike is not directed against you personally, but against the feelings and thoughts that you evoke in others. Your authenticity forces them to confront those aspects of themselves that they diligently suppress. Jung argued that every person carries a shadow within them, hidden, unsightly parts of their personality that do not conform to accepted norms. And when someone appears who involuntarily reflects this shadow, an internal conflict arises. The simplest reaction to this conflict becomes rejection. Those who are true to themselves often face the strongest rejection, because their very existence serves as a living reproach to those who avoid the truth about themselves. Faced with a psychological mirror, many become lost, preferring to turn away from the reflection, distance themselves, or even attack. And the point here is not at all in the errors of the reflection, but in the fact that it exposes what others would like to hide. This mechanism explains why authentic personalities become objects of gossip, alienation, and veiled attacks, hidden under the guise of well-intentioned advice. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the process of a person revealing their true essence. But it is this process that challenges society, because collectives tend to reject those who do not fit into the general framework. A person who thinks and acts independently becomes a threat to a system built on conformism and blind obedience. This is the key understanding. Rejection is not always a sign of a wrong path. On the contrary, it may indicate the awakening of your inner strength, which has nothing to do with arrogance or haughtiness. It is simply a manifestation of the courage to be yourself, discarding masks and pretense. It is this authenticity that poses a threat to many, because it destroys learned patterns of behavior and unconscious roles that people play in society. But instead of asking why your presence causes discomfort, it is much easier to reject you. Remember, if you encounter rejection, it is not because of your shortcomings, but because your existence exposes the shortcomings of others, which few are willing to accept. If your presence causes deep anxiety in others, it is not because of your words or actions, but because of what you awaken in them. This is where Jung's analytical psychology comes into play, an understanding that is difficult for many to accept because of its painfulness. The truth is that the manifestation of your true essence inevitably brings to light not only your virtues, but also the hidden fears, doubts, and unrealized aspirations of those around you. This is not just a beautiful metaphor, but a deep psychological pattern that manifests itself in everyday life. As Carl Jung emphasized, every person carries a shadow within them, that part of the unconscious where everything that we refuse to admit in ourselves is hidden. These suppressed aspects are formed in early childhood under the influence of family upbringing or social norms, which instill in us that certain qualities are undesirable. However, ignoring the shadow does not lead to its disappearance. It continues to influence our reactions, fears, and above all, our judgments about others. This is where you come in. When you remain true to yourself, when you appear before the world without masks and false adaptations, you become a mirror for those around you. Your authenticity confronts them with those parts of themselves that they have suppressed. People who are not aware of their shadow subconsciously perceive your presence as a threat. You remind them of who they could have been, but did not dare to become. At this moment, one of the key psychological mechanisms described by Jung comes into play: projection. Unable to cope with certain aspects of their personality, people transfer them to others. Instead of acknowledging their own doubts, envy, or dissatisfaction, they project them onto you. And suddenly it is you who seem arrogant, presumptuous, or intrusive, not because you are, but because your authenticity highlights the suppressed parts of their self. Jung warned that the brighter a person shines with their truth, the stronger the reaction of those who are trapped in social masks will be. It is noteworthy that this rejection often occurs on a subconscious level. People who criticize, reject, or try to belittle you often do not realize the true reasons for their behavior. They are convinced that they are guided by rational arguments, but in reality, they are fighting not with you, but with what you awaken in them. It is precisely for this reason that many tend to perceive strong-willed individuals as intrusive, which is explained not by personal animosity, but by the internal contradictions of those who feel discomfort. Carl Jung, a distinguished psychologist, noted that unresolved internal conflicts hidden in the shadow of the subconscious are sooner or later projected onto others. And who becomes the target for these projections? Those who dared to look deep inside themselves, who stopped running away from their own weaknesses, accepting and integrating them into their personality. This is true inner strength, not requiring external approval, born from the encounter with the authentic self, free from externally imposed expectations. However, it is this authenticity that often causes a sharp defensive reaction, reminding others of what they have not yet achieved. Therefore, every time you manifest your true essence, when you boldly take your place without pretending or adjusting, you involuntarily become a threat to some. And it's not about your actions, but about the fact that your presence exposes their own shortcomings. This is a truth that few are willing to accept. You become a living reproach to those who have given up a part of themselves. Rejection from their side is a sign that you are on the right path. Carl Jung called individuation a revolutionary process, a path to the true self, full of challenges and trials for those who are accustomed to conformism. A person who is true to themselves inevitably becomes an obstacle for those who blindly follow generally accepted norms, because deep down they realize that there is another way. It is this awareness, the recognition that they have suppressed themselves for years for the sake of belonging to society, that causes them to be shaken. Understanding this psychological mechanism allows you to stop taking dislike personally. Any unjustified criticism, alienation, or attempt to discourage you is confirmation that your presence is fulfilling its role, illuminating the darkness. You become a mirror, but the mirror is not to blame for the reflection. If you have grasped the deep mechanism of projection, your worldview undergoes a radical change. The shadow. If you've come this far and are ready to face the truth, share whether you've ever experienced an inexplicable feeling of dislike, a sense of discomfort in those around you in your presence, even when you haven't committed any reprehensible actions. Tell your story, because your experience can help others realize that they are not alone in their experiences. Prepare for an even deeper dive, because next we will reveal to you the truth that overturns all ideas about true strength, as Carl Jung understood it, and why it has nothing to do with generally accepted notions. We will expose one of the most common myths about rejection. Once you understand how the projection mechanism works and why your presence causes confusion in many, it will become obvious that the dislike you experienced was never your fault. This key realization will help you shed a heavy burden. Perhaps you have believed for years that you need to be less emotional, less candid, or less real in order to earn recognition. Perhaps you have been convinced that rejection is evidence of your shortcomings, that you are too complex, too different from others, or even unpleasant. But here is the harsh truth bequeathed to us by Carl Jung, which shatters all these false notions. The strength that causes rejection has nothing to do with arrogance. It's not about feeling superior to others, not about striving to be the center of attention. True strength in analytical psychology is presence, fullness of presence, as it is associated with the fundamental ability to take one's place in the world. Presence means being here and now, not torn between internal feelings and external manifestations. It means not compromising one's own truth in order to conform to the expectations of others. Presence means not adapting to narrow frameworks, and therein lies the root of the problem. Most people cannot stand those who possess integrity, because a person who does not deny themselves does not need approval. They do not need to adjust in order to be accepted. They do not need to become smaller in order for others to feel bigger. And this is what those who have abandoned their authenticity fear most. When you allow yourself to be authentic, not restricting yourself to the framework of expectations, not wearing a mask of hypocrisy, not dimming the brightness of your view of the world, you involuntarily awaken a deep reaction in those around you. It's like a silent warning, whispering about the existence of another path, a life not subject to the dictates of other people's opinions, a life based not on adaptation, but on genuine inner freedom. However, this perspective turns out to be unbearable for many, especially for those who have erected their self-identity on the foundation of belonging to a particular group. Carl Jung asserted that a person's greatest psychological task is to discover their true self. However, this process of individuation is usually linked to discomfort and even pain, as it requires shedding the masks that were once created for the sake of universal love and recognition. There comes a moment when a person stops performing for the audience, abandons pretense, and leaves the stage where they were applauded, but where they lost themselves. Most people do not dare to take this brave step. They prefer to remain captive in the image they have created, even if it suffocates their soul, because this self-imposed image gives them an illusory sense of belonging. But when you appear before the world in your entirety, without filters or fear, not apologizing for your true self, you prove that these bonds of belonging are just a mirage. You demonstrate that you can exist without needing the approval of the crowd, and that is why some people react so fiercely to your manifestation. It is not about personal dislike at all, but about the fact that your very existence challenges the established worldview of those around you. By following your own path, you destroy the myth that conformity is the only key to recognition. However, true strength has nothing to do with domination and submission. It is not about rising above others or imposing your point of view on them, but about inner integrity. According to Carl Jung, it is this integrity that poses the greatest threat to a society built on uniformity. A person who has preserved their individuality is free, and someone who is truly free cannot be controlled. That is the real reason for the discomfort you cause. Your presence serves as a reminder of the price people pay for adaptation. It exposes the fact that by betraying themselves for approval, they are abandoning a part of their soul. It is this realization that makes their existence unbearable. Therefore, when you doubt yourself or diminish your merits for the sake of recognition, remember, you are not only deceiving yourself, but also betraying your own soul. Carl Jung called this the loss of the soul, the moment when a person ceases to be an individual and begins to play a role imposed by society. This explains why people who have kept their souls intact cause such strong irritation in those who live in a world of fragments. Every time you are rejected not for your actions, but for your authenticity, for your truthfulness, for your very presence, remember, it is not you personally who is being rejected. It is the collective mask that is rebelling against you because you represent a threat to its illusory world. Your authenticity is contagious. Your existence demonstrates that there is life beyond the social theater. And that is why true strength lies not in controlling others, but in freeing yourself from the control of others. If you have reached these lines, leave the word presence in the comments. This is not a simple word, but a conscious choice, a decision to live life to the fullest, not hiding behind masks, not seeking approval, and not dimming your own radiance to appease those who prefer to remain in the shadows. Also, share your experience. Have you ever tried to adapt to others in order to earn recognition? And what were the consequences? Your story may be a valuable lesson for those who doubt the need to pretend for the sake of love. And get ready to move on, because now we will delve into the question of why society sometimes rejects those who dare to be themselves. Why are those who dare to be authentic so often punished? Why did Carl Jung believe that the greatest threat to the system is a person who has freed himself from the fear of being rejected? That is why Jung paid attention not only to individual, but also to collective psychology. Behind the rejection of authentic personalities lies something more than just personal prejudices, an invisible structure that cements the social fabric. Since time immemorial, belonging to a group has been a matter of survival. An outcast from the tribe was deprived of protection, food, and any hope for the future. This ancient fear of exile is deeply rooted in the collective unconscious, the area of the psyche that, according to Jung, connects all people together, like cells of a single organism. But here is a key point. In order to belong, it is necessary to adapt, to obey unspoken rules, to suppress one's individuality in order not to disturb the harmony of the group. That is why Jung so persistently emphasized that individuation, the process of becoming oneself, is a challenge for the collective. After all, a person who remains true to himself, lives by his own rules, and is not afraid of being rejected, calls into question the very foundations of the social order. The most serious danger to society is not a rebel with a fiery gaze, but a person who has ceased to feel the need for conformity. Its very existence serves as living proof that peaceful coexistence does not require uniformity. This is the real reason why society so harshly punishes anyone who dares to deviate from the accepted norm. It is not just that you are different, but that by the very fact of your existence, you assert the possibility of freedom, which is an unbearable blow to a collective structure based on total control. As Jung noted, the collective mind is like a child's psyche, driven by primitive fears and a desperate need to cling to absolute truths. The collective cannot bear the chaos of individual freedom. It needs order, predictability, and unquestioning obedience. And every time you manifest your true self, you disrupt this carefully constructed system, becoming a loose part in a mechanism that only functions properly if all its elements rotate in unison. That is why society tends to perceive authenticity as a kind of moral deviation. From early childhood, we are taught to obey, adapt, strive to please, and be predictable. And woe to anyone who dares to break this unspoken agreement. They will inevitably be punished. Moreover, this does not happen openly, because the collective needs to maintain the illusion of benevolence, justice, and hospitality. Punishment is cleverly disguised as well-intentioned advice, jokes, subtle alienation, sidelong glances, demonstrative silence in response to your words, gossip behind your back, missed invitations, and doors slamming in your face without explanation. Most people mistakenly believe that the problem lies within themselves, not realizing the true background of what is happening. They blame themselves for a lack of charisma, sociability, or charm, but the real reason for their rejection is a lack of blind obedience. Their crime is the audacity to exist beyond the collective mask. the courage to think for themselves and shine their own light without asking anyone's permission. And this turns out to be unbearable for the collective mind. According to the insightful Carl Jung, the collective as such does not have the ability to think. That is the prerogative of the individual. A group, on the other hand, is a mechanism of response, whether aggression or defense, directed against anyone who dares to encroach on the inviolability of accepted norms. Therefore, the brighter your individuality shines, the more warily and hostilely you will be met. And this dislike lacks a rational core, because in the sphere of the collective unconscious, not logical arguments operate, but symbols and deep emotions. For the collective unconscious, a true person is a traitor, a betrayer of the tribe, a stranger capable of destroying the usual way of life. The saddest thing about this situation is that any attempts to explain your position, prove the sincerity of your intentions, or convince others of the legitimacy of your chosen path only increase rejection. It is not about specific actions, but about the very fact of your existence. You are living proof that there is life beyond the mass prison, and this is unbearable for those who need this prison as a guarantee of their own safety. Jung argued that the fear of the collective unconscious is the fear of chaos and the destruction of order, which is maintained only by belief in a common lie. Anyone who dares to declare the existence of an alternative path, of freedom beyond masks, of the possibility of being loved without betraying oneself, of belonging to society without losing one's individuality, will be branded as a psychological heretic. And society will treat them in the same way that it has treated heretics throughout history: exile, silencing, ridicule, rejection. Surprisingly, this kind of rejection manifests itself not only in the higher echelons of power, but also in the most intimate relationships, because any social group is a model of society in miniature. Family, circle of friends, colleagues at work, all these are micro-societies where there is an unspoken order that protects the collective from the infection of authenticity. If you have ever felt that no matter how hard you try to understand, there is an invisible wall erected between you and those around you, know that this wall is quite real. This is the barrier of the collective unconscious, protecting the group from contamination by freedom, because your freedom is a challenge. Your authenticity is a seed of chaos in a system striving for total control for the sake of self-preservation. Carl Jung argued that the only path to the healing of society lies through the liberation of the individual, because the collective thrives only when it consists of free and whole individuals. However, this individual freedom will always cause concern among the herd, since it proves the possibility of a different, non-stereotypical existence. This is the dilemma. Society demands conformity, adherence to set standards, and submission to the collective. But true greatness and genuine freedom are born only beyond these limitations. Those who dare to live according to their own truth inevitably face resistance, because their very existence disrupts the fragile balance of the group. However, it is this confrontation that becomes the engine of change, because every free person who has stopped allowing the collective to limit them subconsciously gives others a signal to awaken, to search for themselves, and to live an authentic life. Rejection from others is not a mark of failure, but rather evidence that you have begun to break free from the shackles of social uniformity, escaping from the invisible prison of conformity. It is a kind of price for genuine self-knowledge, for that very process of individuation that the great Carl Jung considered the highest goal of human psychic development. Ultimately, each of us faces the dilemma: to continue to adapt to other people's expectations, fearing rejection, or to see in this very rejection confirmation that we have finally embarked on our own unique path. Are we ready to sacrifice our individuality for the approval of the crowd? Or will we choose freedom of expression despite possible difficulties?